Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for a Battlefront 2 video I've been wanting to make for about a week now. Because of various current events, I have had a significant increase in the amount of time I've had to both make content and to play Battlefront 2 just for my own enjoyment, which is good news for you guys, as I'll be able to post more content than I usually am able to. With that said, since I've had more time to play, I've been spending more time in HVV with pretty much every hero, even the ones I generally avoid in that mode, and it's really had me thinking about how certain heroes could be improved, at least from my point of view, and I came up with several changes I think could really help some heroes that have either been neglected by DICE over the past 6 months, or just need some quality of life improvements as their current state is a bit clunky, or just not as good as it could be, because some of the heroes on this list are ones I really like. Actually, my main is on this list, but I do think there are ways to improve them slightly. Some of the topics we'll be covering today include Rey's random quotes completely ruining any flank you might be trying to pull off by using insight, a few baffling recent changes to Anakin I'd like DICE to reevaluate or at least take a look at, and something I think you Han mains will find really interesting, as I am a Han main myself, and I did quite a bit of testing with his sharpshooter ability, and the results were something I had suspected but wasn't sure about until I did some testing of my own. I actually put together about 20 of these changes, but I didn't want to bombard you with that many all at once, so if you do end up liking this video and would like to see the rest, let me know by leaving a thumbs up on this upload. Anyway, with that being said, let's start out with 2 changes I'd really like to see made to Obi-Wan. In my opinion, Obi-Wan is a hero who has kind of fallen by the wayside in HVV. Is he still good? Yes, and in Galactic Assault, I really do enjoy using him because of his survivability. He's probably the most survivable hero in the entire game. He has a very strong block and a better than average health regeneration pool, which are both great assets. However, in HVV, he is very easy to counter if you know what you're doing and keep tabs on him. Just looking at his abilities, his all-out push is one of the easiest force powers to dodge in the entire game. His defensive rush is kind of a joke against other lightsaber heroes. Usually when he uses it, I'll just dash behind him and choke, freeze, or stun him in some way. It makes him very vulnerable and has a pretty underwhelming payoff, because if you're just not paying attention and he does land a hit on you, he's only going to deal 140 damage, 10 less than if Obi-Wan just swung at you with his regular lightsaber attack from behind, which obviously has way less of a risk. Finally, we have Obi-Wan's restrictive mind trick, which DICE decided to nerf into the ground several updates ago, and all it does these days is disable your abilities for 5 seconds, which is mostly just mildly annoying, because you can still do everything else regularly, and if you're a lightsaber hero, literally all you have to do is block until it's over. Because of what I just listed out, I really never find myself dying to an Obi-Wan because he's just so easy to counter nowadays. I'm sure there are great Obi-Wan players out there, but just in my experience having to fight him, he is just so easy to counter. I have a couple of small tweaks I'd like to see made to Obi-Wan just to make his abilities a little more well suited for HVV. The first change I would love to see made, and this would give his defensive rush more of a use against lightsaber heroes, is for the final strike from his defensive rush to be a block breaker, dealing moderate damage, something around 100. Most of you know when using defensive rush you can press the attack button again, and Obi-Wan will do a little twirl that deals 60 damage, but as it currently stands, both the regular attack and the second one are easily blockable. I think the second half should go through block similar to Anakin's Passionate Strike, and this would make that ability feel a little stronger in that mode. The second change I would love to see made is to Obi-Wan's restrictive mind trick, which used to be one of the best abilities in the entire game, but nowadays I'm just mildly annoyed when I'm hit with it. I think when it completely disabled dashing, it was a little too strong against blaster heroes. You couldn't really do much when you couldn't roll or use abilities, but what I would like to see happen as a bit of a happy medium is for restrictive mind trick to double the cooldown of rolls of affected enemies. Most heroes have 2 rolls or dashes, each with a 1-second cooldown. During the 5.5 seconds of restrictive mind trick, you will keep whatever dashes you have available, but for those 5 seconds it will take you 2 seconds to get a roll back. This will make it so blaster heroes will have to be a bit more careful when they roll during restrictive mind trick and can't just spam their dashes, but will give the ability more functionality across the board. I think it's a nice compromise to an ability DICE really butchered when it was nerfed. Next up, I have a small change I would like to see made to Han, who is my most played hero, at least for the past few months. I love Han, his Detonite charge is great, his shoulder charge is also very good, and his DL-44 is pretty much the most satisfying weapon I've used in any game ever. On the other hand, his sharpshooter ability, while fun in a few very specific situations, is more of a liability than anything else much of the time, as the damage output compared to just his regular pistol is almost identical, yet sharpshooter comes with some major drawbacks, and if you don't believe me, I'll show you some tests. I did a bunch of testing in arcade, and as it turns out, if you factor in the startup animation time of sharpshooter, which there is no reason not to because without using it you can just shoot immediately, but if you are going to try to use it you have to sit through the animation before you can fire. With the animation included, Han's time to kill, and I use Kylo in this example with only headshots, actually goes up when using sharpshooter. It takes him longer to kill Kylo with sharpshooter versus if he had just used his regular blaster. If you don't include the animation, which I'm only doing so for the sake of testing because in a real scenario you have to sit through it, but if you don't include it, Han's time to kill with sharpshooter versus his regular blaster only decreases by 0.21 seconds, just over 0.2 of a second faster with sharpshooter versus his regular blaster, so basically nothing. To add major insult to injury while using sharpshooter, Han can't run, your sensitivity is turned down to just about nothing to further restrict you, and even more importantly, your range is completely butchered. His regular DL-44 is a laser even at very long ranges, but sharpshooter gives the blaster major spread so it can't be used past medium range. All of those restrictions for what is essentially a longer time to kill, and again, even if you don't factor in the animation, which you should, but if you don't, the time to kill is essentially the same, and this is supposed to be a hero ability, but what it really does for Han is make him super vulnerable with little benefit. I will occasionally use it if I come up behind a choking Vader and just want to have some fun, or if I'm set up in a narrow hallway and can just sit there ready to blast someone, but outside of those very specific situations, it's just not worth it, even going by the raw numbers. I think DICE needs to completely remove the mobility restriction from sharpshooter and speed up the animation substantially. They also need to take a look at the time to kill, because an ability shouldn't have a huge risk factor, but then take longer to kill than his standard blaster, and it also completely removes the DL-44's long range capacity, another reason it's just a waste right now. I say this as someone who loves Han, but as it is right now it's mostly just a risk with no reward, and I really only use it for the fun factor nowadays. My next 4 are very simple changes that I'll likely get through much faster than my changes to Han and Obi-Wan. The first simple change I would love to see goes to Bossk, and the reticle on his Relby. Bossk is by far the hero that is most reliant on his abilities. His Dioxis is awesome, his mines are so satisfying, and Predator Instincts is pretty much the greatest thing ever once you get a feel for his grenade launcher. However, when his abilities are on cooldown, he is left with a weapon that functions well as a sniper, but in close quarter situations, even if you land every single shot, you will get outdamaged by every other hero blaster, and obviously before you comment, of course you can outgun someone if they're missing and you're landing all of your shots, but just in terms of raw time to kill, Bossk's Relby up close is about twice as slow as the second slowest weapon. Part of that comes from his Relby being bugged, or at least I assume it's bugged, it's always been this way, as it has no headshot multiplier. It deals 126 damage whether or not you land a headshot, and it's also the slowest firing hero blaster in Battlefront 2, so not a great combo. Every other blaster in Battlefront 2 can just aim for the head and deal 1.9 times as much damage as a body shot. Bossk cannot do this. Additionally, his blaster has the most awkward reticle of all time. It's this huge oval, but his blaster doesn't shoot pellets, it's not a shotgun even though you'd think it was from the reticle, it just shoots a single bolt from somewhere in that massive reticle. As far as changes go, first I would like to see DICE fix his headshot multiplier so a good player can benefit from high accuracy at close range, and I would also like to see him be given an accurate reticle like everyone else has, as can be seen in this image here, just as a concept as to what I would like to see, or something similar. I think that would go a long way to making Bossk feel a lot better when his abilities are on cooldown. The next quick fix I would like to see is for Leia, who overall is in a very good place right now, and I have a hero guide that should be dropping this Tuesday I think you guys are really gonna like. With that said, I would love one small change to be made to her thermal detonators. As they currently stand, you have 3 in total, but to go into cooldown on any of them, you have to use all 3, and then the entire ability will go into a 13-second cooldown. It is really annoying just having to waste grenades all the time to get all 3 back. Most of the time you'll use 1 or 2, have 1 left over, and there are no enemies nearby. So you are just kind of forced to throw your last one out and waste it, so you can get all 3 back. I really want them to just cool down like Luke's Rush or Yoda's Dash, where you use 1 and that one goes into cooldown. If you use 2, 2 go into cooldown. You get the idea. It'd make them feel a bit less clunky and more user-friendly. It's a pretty simple fix, one I've seen requested by others as well, so I think this change will likely happen soon. The final quick fix I would like to see goes to Chewbacca, who DICE sort of reworked in the last update, but it didn't really do much to fix his biggest problem, which is his extreme reliance on Furious Bowcaster. Furious Bowcaster is incredible, his ground slam is great, and Chewbacca's shot grenade does what it's supposed to. However, his regular Bowcaster is still pretty weak, and honestly the last patch was a bit of a nerf they didn't mention. They made his Bowcaster way easier to aim, which is awesome, I love the new reticle. However, they didn't change his damage output whatsoever, but they nerfed his fire rate into the ground, which wasn't mentioned in the patch notes. I have no idea why. It's about 33% slower nowadays. You can also no longer charge up a more powerful shot, meaning Chewie has even less of a long range option. Even up close, his bowcaster takes 3 full shots with a very slow fire rate just to kill a heavy. I don't want major changes to Chewbacca, just 2 small ones. I really think they should revert the nerf to his rate of fire and give him an option back for a charge shot so he has some sort of medium to long range option, at least to do something. It is so apparent how weak his regular bowcaster is when you're using him even against a regular trooper, because the amount of times I've faced off against a full health Chewbacca at medium range as the assault class with an EL-16 and then proceeded to take out 80% of his health before he can kill me is kind of sad. He's supposed to be a hero, so I would really like for DICE to improve him against infantry by reverting the fire rate nerf and giving him a charge shot option like he had before. Alright, that brings us up to 7 total changes covered for 5 different heroes. Just to summarize, we had improvements for Obi-Wan's restrictive mind trick and defensive rush, a few tweaks to make Han's sharpshooter more worthy of its status as a hero ability, 2 different changes to Bossk, a headshot multiplier fix and a reticle change, a quality of life adjustment for Leia's detonators, and a buff for Chewie's bowcaster. My final 3 changes, at least for today's video, should be pretty easy to get through as they are simple changes. The first is for Anakin, who is a hero that DICE just doesn't really seem to know what to do with. Pretty much the entire community has been telling DICE for the past 6 months that the real issue with Anakin was the fact that he could knock you down twice in a row, and if they just added some sort of knockdown immunity, he would have been fine like a couple of updates ago. Like 2 nerfs ago, if they just added some sort of knockdown immunity, so after having been knocked down once, you get a second to recover before you can be again, that would have fixed a lot of the issues people had with Anakin and just getting force spammed in general, because nobody likes being a beach ball getting pushed around. However, DICE just kind of ignored that and kept nerfing Anakin in the weirdest ways possible, plus they've somehow implemented several pretty awful bugs for Anakin. Nowadays, he is in a bit of a weird place. Luke and Darth Vader are both unquestionably better heroes. Kylo, Palpatine, Grievous, and arguably Han I would also say are better heroes than Anakin right now, in no small part to how buggy DICE made him. His heroic might just straight up doesn't work much of the time, or you'll get stuck in the animation and lose a major chunk of health, and there's also something seriously wrong with retribution, which I've seen many other people talk about as well. Sometimes it just won't do anything, but the ability will be used up anyway, but more importantly, the damage reduction you get just doesn't work until the ability is actually over. I've noticed it so many times. I will be using retribution, and about 2 seconds before the animation is over, my damage reduction will just cancel, and everyone firing at me is all of a sudden dealing full damage while I'm stuck in an animation. However, this video isn't about fixing glitches. I just wanted to explain what DICE has done to Anakin, and anyone who has used him since the February update knows exactly what I'm talking about. The actual change I want for Anakin, other than the fixes of course, are for his Passionate Strike. During the January update, I believe it was, in what was one of the most baffling nerfs of all time, DICE decided that Passionate Strike, of all things, needed a huge nerf, and reduced the damage to troopers and reinforcements by 130. However, even now, the damage isn't the issue with Passionate Strike. The issue is, the ability has a super long animation and only deals slightly more damage to heroes than a regular swing, and is also super predictable and opens you up to all sorts of damage. When Anakin uses Passionate Strike, he can be choked, he can be claw rushed, you can do whatever you want to him because Passionate Strike offers him no protection, but can be dodged super easily because of the long and predictable animation. The only change I want to see for Passionate Strike is for the animation to be sped up substantially so Passionate Strike is just more worth using, because right now the risk isn't generally worth the quote-unquote reward. Right now, it's really only good for finishing off a low health hero through a block, but only if you're playing against someone who isn't good. Even if you kind of know what you're doing, it is super easy to predict when Anakin is going to try and Passionate Strike you, so you can easily dash back and then take advantage of him letting his block down, which is what I try to do against Anakins all the time. Other than fixes, that is really the only change Anakin needs. Right now, he has a huge weakness, which is his stamina, and I would say that's probably a good thing because he needs a weakness, but a weakness shouldn't be a ton of bugs, and an ability that is a bit of a joke right now, and I think a streamlined animation with a bit of protection would be all Passionate Strike needs to be a solid ability again. That's 8, and number 9 is a simple fix for Rey's insight. One thing that really bothers me every time I try to use Rey is trying to flank after activating Insight. It seems like a good idea, right? I mean, Insight takes you off the minimap, increases your damage, and lowers your stamina use. Perfect recipe for a successful flank. However, my cover is often blown, and it's blown by myself, by no fault of my own, because Rey will scream out various quotes while you're using Insight, completely ruining any stealth I was trying to pull off. Now, the way Battlefront 2 works, when you hear your character say something, it doesn't necessarily mean enemies hear the same exact quote at the same time, but she does say quotes that enemies can hear while using Insight, because I notice Rey's that way all the time when they're trying to be sneaky. I would like to see one of two things happen to fix that issue. Either DICE just disables Rey hero banter so enemies can't hear it while Insight is active, or they implement some sort of audio distortion feature where when Rey is speaking during Insight, it sounds like she is everywhere so you can't pinpoint where she's speaking from. As simple as something like hero banter is, the amount of time it has alerted an entire enemy HVV team when I'm sneaking up on them is so frustrating, and Rey's entire playstyle revolves around ambushing unsuspecting enemies. The final fix I would suggest is not for an entire hero per se, but for a specific hero star card, that being Boba Fett's Intense Barrage. For those of you who have been playing Battlefront 2 from the very beginning, you will likely remember a time when Intense Barrage was one of, if not the single best hero star cards in the entire game. It more than doubled your rocket's damage output by increasing the number of rockets Boba fired from 3 to 7, something like that. I can't remember if it was 7 or 8, I know they nerfed it once. But anyways, DICE ended up reworking the card and just made the standard rockets a lot better, but the rework of the card rendered Intense Barrage all but useless. Nowadays, the card functions by reducing the next cooldown of your barrage ability by 7 seconds if you deal 500 damage with your last use. The issue with that is, even if you land a direct hit with all 5 of your rockets, you will only deal 375 damage. If you are also running the Focalized card, which increases your rocket damage by 10 in the very center of your rocket's radius, you will deal a maximum of 425 damage, and that's if you land every single rocket in that 1 meter radius for the bonus damage. Because the damage value of 500 is so much higher than you'll ever be dealing with a single rocket use, Intense Barrage is just a complete waste of a slot. The only way to get any benefit out of it is if multiple heroes or reinforcements are just standing in the exact same spot, because the explosion radius of Boba's barrage is very, very small. Even if 3 infantry were all standing in a tiny circle, just waiting for you to hit them with all of your rockets, you would still only deal 450 damage, as they would all be dead before you dealt any more than that. I actually used Intense Barrage for about a week just to see if I could ever get any benefit out of it, and in that full week of playing I was able to benefit from the reduced cooldown exactly one time, and it was when 2 players were distracted and emoting at each other. I really would like DICE to take a look at this card and make it semi-worthwhile, because it has potential. My suggestion would be for DICE to drastically reduce the damage requirement down to something like 275 or 250 damage, something you'll actually be doing on a semi-regular basis, but also reduce the cooldown reduction from a 7-second reduction to something more mild like a 3-second reduction at epic level. Then you will have a card that you will benefit from pretty regularly, and also has a reward that is attainable, but not too powerful. Really, Boba just has a problem across the board with the star cards these days. Over half of them are just not worth using in any situation, but Intense Barrage is by far the worst defender because it's all but useless. Well guys, that is all 10 of my suggested hero changes. If you would like to see a follow-up to this video, because I put together about 20 of these in total, let me know by leaving a thumbs up on this video, and if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe. Also, I should quickly mention I did start a community on PlayStation you guys can join if you want to. It's called Battlefront Night, and over the past couple of days I've been playing HVV with subs, which has been far more fun than trying to play with randoms. I will try to do something similar for PC and Xbox in the future, as I do have both. I just usually play on PS4 for multiplayer games and PC for other games, but I'll try to get something going for both of those consoles as well, or both of those platforms. Anyway guys, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.